All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and thanks for coming in this morning. It's I know an exciting time. The documentary is going to be screening tomorrow night. Have you had a chance to see it yet?
Yep, we've both seen it.
What do you think?
We enjoyed it. We thought it was a very professional job, and it accurately reflected, as accurate as possible, because everybody's got a different perspective, but it accurately reflected the events that took place.
It's we discussed it at the time. There was the film earlier this year, but this is more of and I think the film was open about taking a bit of artistic license and telling the story, but this is a pretty accurate reflection of what actually happened, isn't it?
It does cover the history of what happened very well, I think, doesn't it, Dave? And I think they did their research. I was really impressed with the way they did their research, and they knew a lot about it before we even got involved ourselves, and they interviewed us and others. They knew what was going on, and they were able to get deep into the story. I think they did a very good job with that.
Was there any question for you as to getting involved? Was there any hesitance in going back and reflecting upon that time?
Well, Dave started it off. He was there, came up with the idea, but I think there was a lot of hesitance, wasn't there?
Are you talking about the film or the?
Yeah, being involved with the film. I mean, we were hesitant. Was there any hesitance in getting involved with the film?
It was. We knew Adrian Blackburn was involved. He wrote the book, and we knew the film was going to be based on the book, so we had no hesitation at all.
It does seem like the wildest adventure.
Looking back, it sure does. Yeah.
Is that how you remember it? Is it one of those things you look back, with the benefit of several decades, and you look through sort of rose-tinted glasses?
I look back and shake my head and wonder. I can't believe that those things just fell into place as well as they did, and we actually pulled it off.
It does seem like an enormous task to take on all the powers that be, as you did at the time. Was there? Take me back to when the idea to form Radio Hauraki and to form a pirate radio station and to broadcast from the Gulf started to come about. Was there any question as to whether or not you'd be able to achieve it?
With the arrogance of youth, there was no question about it, but it never really became an eventuality until we actually got our hands on a boat. At that point, we knew it was a goer, and we got the boat very cheap, virtually for nothing. So from that point on, it was very much full steam ahead.
I know that you had to learn so many things on the job, getting the transmitter up and going, all that sort of thing, and just getting to sea would have been a huge effort. Were there times throughout the process where you wondered, is this actually going to fly?
Oh, of course we did, yeah, because we were being hit with all these obstacles from the Marine Department, and the various ministries of government were doing their very best to make life extremely hard for us as we were preparing to go to sea. This is well before we got to sea. We're being hit with all these orders the boat is unseaworthy, you got to do this, this, and this, and we went out and did this, and this, and still there was more to do, and we got just bloody stupid, And until the end, we said, look, we are ready to go to sea, and we're going to go. And it takes a bit of grit to do that when you've got the weight of the authority against you. Those decisions were very hard to take, but they were taken nonetheless.
Yeah.
There was also a good guy, bad guy element to the authorities. I mean, while they were persecuting us, and with the Marine Department and the Post Office, who ran the radio business in those days, the government was still working behind the scenes to try and keep us on side and holding out promises of, well, not promises, but the eventuality of a land license. They tried to talk us out of it as well as force us out of it.
Yes.
And the two were going on at the same time. We had a very good friendly relationship with Jack Scott, the minister. But while that was going on, his army was trying to destroy us.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre. I mean, it's a bizarre position for anyone to find themselves, let alone a group of fairly inexperienced, cocksure young men.
Yeah.
Well, there was an election coming up, and as usual, a lot of emphasis on the youth vote. Yeah. We were seen as representing that, and that's why I think they were going so carefully with us. I don't think anybody would get away with that today.
You remember the day we opened the New Zealand Herald and there was a photo, it was in the middle of summer, and a photo of Rob Muldoon at his beach place at Hadfields Beach with his 3 kids all dressed in Radio Hauraki T-shirts. And we said, this is the start. We can make a mate of this guy.
Tell me how that came about, because so many social movements and things. I mean, you look at how social change comes about today, especially with young people, and a lot of there's an easy format. You know, we have the internet, the social media, all that sort of stuff. How was it just trying to get that attention and that groundswell of support back then?
There's no problem. The attention found us. We were trying to stay away from it until we launched.
Yeah, it found us.
But I mean, newsmen know a good story, and we were a good story. They never left us alone for a minute.
Yeah. And how aware of you were? How aware were you of other pirate radio stations overseas, and how much did you draw upon those for inspiration?
Well, I think Radio Caroline is where we got the idea from originally. Yeah. So we were pretty well aware of what was going on in Europe, and that was what inspired us to do it here. If they can do it, we can do it.
We certainly didn't have any regular contact with them, and we ran our own style of radio station right from the start. It was quite different to the British pirates, because we were far worse off than them. We had no money. We had a boat that rocked around like hell on the water, and you couldn't operate properly on it anyway as a radio operation. And we had all these obstacles that the British didn't have. So we just formulated our own style, I suppose, didn't we?
So made it up as we went along.
Yeah, made it up as we went along.
Yeah.
We had no
It was number 8 wire stuff.
No contact whatsoever with the European pirates.
No. Yeah.
They were just simply an inspiration. Yeah.
The internet didn't exist then.
No.
Everything about the story, though, is cunning. It's clever. You know, just from the essence of drawing of finding that it's like almost like a Venn diagram, isn't it? Working out where the international waters lay in the Gulf, to the not calling the minister to give evidence. All those. I mean, it's peppered with clever and cunning moments. I wonder what life was like at sea, because it seems, and looking at the old photographs, and even with the dramas of the storms that are depicted in the documentary, looking at the old sun-drenched photographs of people diving off the decks, it looks like a very glamorous existence. Whereas I'm sure it was nothing like that.
If only. Yeah, although we had a very hardy crew, which helped us out. Young guys and some older guys too who had seagoing experience. Others who were just in it for the adventure, and they made a good combination of people who were determined to keep this thing running, and they deserve a lot of praise for what they did. So there's the odd photo of them jumping off in their underpants into the water and think, there were nice summer days, but what about the winters? Yeah. Dave, you were out there a few times.
A couple of
winter.
shipwrecks, yeah.
And
I used to watch the weather every day with fingers crossed that we get through another day, because it was that very small triangle of international water, and
I remember being round at your house, some nights, and we'd be listening to the signal, and it would be coming and going, as the boat was rocking, and we think, what the hell?
And we're listening to the wind whistling overhead.
Through.
Yeah.
It was frightening stuff, sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that must have actually been awful. I mean, it's easy just to forget we don't have the ease of communication, and you didn't have the ease of communication, and all those sorts of things that we do today. Yeah. And were you anal about staying within that small triangle of international waters?
Well, next question.
Yeah.
No, we strayed a bit when we had to. Like we were never going to endanger people's lives, were we?
No.
Yeah.
So as soon as it got rough, the skipper had the instructions, head for land.
Yeah.
And we had a tie-up point at Wangaparapara.
We owned the wharf at Whangaparapara, and so whenever it got dangerous, it was a port with no houses.
Yeah.
And the radio inspectors would detect that we were moving from their equipment, and they'd fly out to try and catch us, wouldn't they?
Yeah. But we had the local constabulary on side, and they used to warn us.
Because they tip us off.
Yeah.
And,
isn't that bizarre?
So we'd either turn it off or sail out again.
Really?
There was no road, you see. They had to come over by Land Rover over a track.
Yeah. And we'd have forewarned every time they were coming. We knew. Yeah.
It's amazing. It seems extraordinary they would go to the lengths they did to try and shut it off.
Yeah. Both within the bureaucratic system and practically by hiring aircraft to fly out to nab us in in the bud, so to speak.
I don't think they ever expected that they would lose in court. That was a key turning point as well.
Right.
Important part of the film too, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah.
You know, how they show that court case and the winning of that, I thought was brilliantly done.
Because that one man, Jack Scott, he was a Minister of Broadcasting, he was a Minister of Marine, and he was the Postmaster General, which meant he ran the three portfolios.
He was the Stephen
that we were
Joyce of...
He was,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
How did it sound then? I mean, we hear snippets of Radio Hauraki from back in the day. But how different was Radio Hauraki to radio today? You were playing tapes off the ship, so obviously there were a few issues from time to time with the signal.
Technical issues.
Yeah, we also had live announcers on the ship.
Yeah.
Sometimes if the tapes didn't get out, they had to take over.
Yeah.
I know during the shipwreck they were broadcasting live.
Crossovers, because each tape had to cross over every half hour. And sometimes they'd run slow. You remember the old story when they'd switch on the oven for dinner and the tapes would start to slow down because there wasn't enough power to run at all, you know. But those guys did a great job. But to all intents and purposes, it was a pretty slick broadcast operation back here, back in town. We were running exactly as if we were live.
Yeah.
Except that we were a week out, so we couldn't talk about the weather, for example.
Yeah.
But everything else, and people still think
that it was live.
It was
really?
live.
Yeah.
Many people do, yeah.
I know, particularly for young people, hearing that music, that style of radio, just would have been a total revolution.
It blew them to bits.
Yeah.
Even for us, it was really exciting. I mean, there'd been no pop music on radio in New Zealand ever.
Yeah.
Half hour on Sundays, and
we sat around for hours when we sailed out on the boat to hear the first record being. You know, it was like you're waiting to have your first child.
You really take it for granted, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Yeah.
Obviously, the story has a sad ending, and it is compartmentalized by sadness in many respects. And for you guys now reflecting on that ending, I mean, it just seems absurd after all that time at sea. Mm-hmm. There should be, such a key member of the team
on the last day
should die on the very last day.
The last hours.
Yeah. How do you reflect upon that now?
Just, still like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And, the irony of it all was that we spent all this time and took all these precautions to make sure that lives were not endangered. And we got pretty close to it sometimes. But just on the last night, we were simply sailing back to Auckland. It was no big deal. It wasn't even a storm that we lost him in.
No.
A high swell just happened to hit the boat at the wrong time as he was walking past a gap in the side of the ship and catapulted him off the side of the ship. That was all. It was simple. We were there. We were playing cards out aft when it happened. Just
it's one of the. I mean, it's one of those awful tragic things, isn't it? But it's sort of. I guess it brought a level of gravity and seriousness to, what had been 3 years of adventure, but fairly responsibility-free adventure. Is that fair to say? I mean, it really was.
Yeah. Well,
responsibility free. I don't know about that. We still had a responsibility to our people, and we did our best to maintain that. In the end, it was going to sea is risky business, and doing what we were doing was always risky.
Yeah.
All we could do was minimise the risks and make sure everybody knew what was involved.
Yeah.
But,
the interesting thing about this experience is that we don't think we were ever irresponsible in terms of, we were never subversive in terms of our relationship with the government on air. We didn't encourage people to come out with placards and support us. They did, but we never asked them to, did we?
Yeah.
No.
We tried to be responsible.
Yeah.
And we particularly tried to be, we had a certified skipper on the ship. There was no mucking around with the marine laws or anything like that.
Yeah.
We employed 2 full crews, so they got 2 weeks on, 1 week off.
Yeah.
We had 2 qualified skippers.
Yeah.
And,
well, I mean, it's because of it is because of your your actions, I suppose, that this station is what it is, and that so many other stations are what they are in New Zealand. Are you proud when you look back, when you see the documentary, when you remember those years, when you really stop and think about what you achieved? You must be
proud,
really
yeah,
proud.
I'm proud that we achieved it, and we played such a big role in such changes in the way New Zealanders lived. Because I think that led on to, that was sort of the dawn breaker for a whole raft of social change that followed.
And what I love
ushered in by rock and roll, I guess.
Yeah.
What I love about this film is it allows the Facebook generation to see what actually happened and what young people can do in this country, you know, if they've got a bit of entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whatever it be, whether it's raising beehives or running a radio station.
Yeah.
You know, there's I sometimes think some of that inspiration is being lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is. I totally agree with you. I think it's I think it was very, very clever, and I think inspiration is the right word for
Well, it's harder now. I mean, I don't think you could do what we did then now. I mean, the authorities simply would not tolerate it. I mean, you're sitting in a little triangle of international water. Give me a break, you know. Send out the destroyers and get the buggers.
That's right. And it was pretty close to that anyway.
You wouldn't pull it off now, no. So it is harder to come up with ideas like that anyway.
Yeah.
In fact, you'd have to say, had Labor got in at any point at that, you know, as we were in those critical 3.5 years, we'd have probably been in the same boat.
Yeah.
Or out of the same boat, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it was a political thing. And that's half the story.
Well, it's a pleasure to speak to you both. Thank you so much for your time, and congratulations not only on what you achieved, but on the documentary. It's a real pleasure, and I think for anyone who's perhaps unfamiliar with the story or needs refreshing, it's a great example of New Zealand entrepreneurial spirit. It's fantastic.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Jack. That's great.